Deep in the jungles of Mexico, massive stone faces stare out in silent judgment. Who were the people who carved these colossal heads over 3,000 years ago? They were the Olmec, the mysterious mother culture of ancient Mesoamerica. Their civilization rose from the sweltering Gulf Coast lowlands around 1,600 years before the Common Era, laying the foundations for every great culture that followed, from the Maya to the Aztec. Yet for all their influence, they left behind more questions than answers. By the end of this journey, you will understand 30 of their most profound mysteries, from vanished cities to a potential ancient writing system. We will explore why their greatest monuments were ritually destroyed and what their strange Were-jaguar gods truly meant. What does it feel like to stand before a mystery that has endured for millennia? The most basic question about the Olmec is also the most profound. Where did they come from? This is not a simple query about migration patterns. It strikes at the heart of their identity. Did they emerge slowly and organically from the local populations of the Mexican Gulf Coast, or did something more dramatic spark their sudden rise? The evidence presents a fascinating puzzle. Around 1,400 years before the Common Era, at a place called San Lorenzo, something remarkable happened. Almost overnight, in archaeological terms, a society of incredible sophistication burst onto the scene. They were carving colossal heads from single blocks of basalt, a stone quarried from mountains dozens of miles away. They were constructing enormous earthen platforms and plazas, moving staggering amounts of earth without the wheel or pack animals. They were creating exquisite jade and serpentine artwork, demonstrating a mastery of materials and a complex symbolic language. The problem is, archaeologists have struggled to find clear, gradual predecessors in the region. It is as if a fully formed artistic and architectural style, along with the complex social organization needed to support it, simply appeared. This absence of obvious local roots has fueled decades of debate and given rise to more controversial theories. Some have pointed to stylistic similarities in art and iconography with cultures across the Pacific, suggesting the possibility of ancient transoceanic contact that provided a catalyst. Others see strong, undeniable connections to later indigenous cultures of Mesoamerica, arguing for a purely local, albeit rapid, evolution. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a unique fusion of indigenous genius and perhaps isolated outside influences that we may never fully trace. Their origin story remains their first and greatest enigma, the blank page at the beginning of their history. These colossal heads are the signature icons of the Olmec world. 17 of these massive sculptures have been discovered, each carved from a single, gigantic block of volcanic basalt. They stand up to 11 feet tall and can weigh more than 20 tons, the equivalent of several full-grown elephants. Their faces are unforgettable, with broad, flat noses, thick lips, and distinctive helmet-like headgear. But the most pressing question is not how they were made, but who they were made for. Who do these stern, silent faces represent? The leading theory suggests they are portraits of powerful individual Olmec rulers, carved to project their authority and legacy in stone for eternity. The unique facial features and distinct headdresses on each statue support this idea of individual portraiture. Yet other scholars propose they represent deified ancestors watching over the living, or perhaps even renowned ball players from the ritual sport that was central to Olmec life. The truth is, we are looking at individuals whose names and stories are utterly lost to time, their identities reduced to a powerful, anonymous presence. The creation and placement of these heads is a testament to a staggering communal effort. The basalt did not come from the soft river valleys where the Olmec built their cities. It was quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains, a rugged volcanic range dozens of miles away from centers like San Lorenzo. Imagine the undertaking, moving a 20-ton block of stone through swampy lowlands and across rivers without wheels, metal tools, or domesticated animals like oxen or horses. The most likely method involved a combination of log rollers, rope, and immense human labor. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people would have been mobilized to pull these monoliths on sledges, coordinating their efforts under the hot sun. This was not merely art, it was a monumental display of social power. It proves the Olmec had a highly organized society with leaders capable of commanding vast labor forces for projects that served a spiritual or political purpose rather than an immediate practical need. The heads were not just portraits, they were proclamations. Each one declared, "Look at what we can achieve together, look at the power of the one we serve." After being painstakingly transported, many of these heads were then deliberately mutilated and buried by the Olmec themselves, a final act that adds another layer of profound mystery to their story. This deliberate destruction of their own monuments leads us directly into the heart of Olmec spiritual belief, a world dominated by a truly bizarre and powerful image. Across their artwork, from tiny jade pendants to massive altar carvings, we find a recurring, unsettling figure. It has the snarling mouth and powerful body of a jungle jaguar, yet it often possesses the helpless, weeping face of a human infant. Its head is frequently split by a deep, central cleft, and its mouth curls dramatically downward in a perpetual grimace. Scholars call this the Were-jaguar motif, a fusion of man and beast that seems to have been central to Olmec identity. But what does this strange hybrid actually represent? One compelling theory views it as the ultimate depiction of a shamanic transformation. In many ancient cultures, shamans were believed to cross the boundary between the human and animal worlds, taking on the power and attributes of spirit animals. The jaguar, as the apex predator of the Mesoamerican jungle, symbolized raw power, stealth, and dominion over both the physical and spiritual realms. A shaman becoming a Were-jaguar would therefore be accessing the ultimate source of earthly and supernatural authority. Another interpretation sees the figure not as a transforming shaman, but as a specific deity, perhaps a god of rain, lightning, and fertility. The cleft head is strikingly similar to the fissure in the earth that maize sprouts from, and the downturned mouth could symbolize weeping clouds that bring life-giving rain. The image might represent a divine child of a jaguar father and a human mother, a mythological ancestor who bridged the natural and supernatural worlds to bring essential knowledge to the people. This connects to the Olmec's profound reverence for the jaguar itself. To them, the jaguar was more than just a dangerous animal, it was a master of all domains. It ruled the dense jungle floor, it could climb trees to reach the canopy, and it was a powerful swimmer, making it lord of the earth, the sky, and the water. Most significantly, as a creature most active at dawn and dusk, it was seen as a guardian of the threshold, a being that could move freely into the terrifying and fertile darkness of the underworld. The Were-jaguar, therefore, might be a symbol of this permeable boundary, a being that could harness the chaotic, creative forces of the world below to sustain the world above. This obsession with transformation and powerful hybrid beings hints at a religion far more complex and psychologically deep than we once assumed, a spirituality that sought to master the very forces of nature through ritual and symbol. Their deep connection to the jaguar and the underworld suggests a people intensely aware of the cycles of nature, and this awareness extended far beyond the jungle floor, reaching up into the heavens themselves. The Olmec were not just masters of earth and spirit, they were meticulous watchers of the sky. Evidence is mounting that their great ceremonial centers were not randomly arranged, but were deliberately aligned to capture the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets. Take the grand site of Venta, constructed on an island in a swamp. Its central axis, the line running through its most important pyramids and plazas, is oriented precisely 8 degrees west of true north. This is not a casual error or a geographical coincidence. This specific alignment seems designed to track the sun's most extreme northerly and southerly positions on the horizon, marking the solstices. On these pivotal days, the rising or setting sun would have been perfectly framed by the architecture, casting long, dramatic shadows or illuminating specific monuments in a display of celestial choreography. This would have allowed Olmec priests to predict the turning of the seasons, a matter of life and death for an agricultural society with stunning theatrical precision. But their astronomical knowledge may have been even more sophisticated. They likely tracked the complex, looping path of Venus, the brilliant morning and evening star, which was later deified by the Maya as a dangerous, warlike entity. The cyclical appearances and disappearances of Venus were seen as powerful omens, and aligning a city to its movements would have given the ruling elite a profound claim to divine knowledge, the ability to commune with the forces that govern time itself. This leads to one of their most enduring intellectual legacies, the creation of the 260-day sacred calendar. Unlike a solar calendar tied to the year's length, this was a ritual count, a mesh of 20-day signs and 13 numbers that created a 260-day cycle. This calendar had no obvious practical agricultural purpose. Instead, it was a spiritual device used for divination, to set the dates for ceremonies, and to define the personality and fate of individuals based on their day of birth. Every single culture that came after the Olmec, from the Zapotec to the Maya to the Aztec, used a version of this same 260-day count. It is the bedrock of Mesoamerican timekeeping. The Olmec, it seems, first codified this system, seeing in the heavens not just lights but a divine script governing destiny. Their cities were therefore more than political capitals. They were colossal stone calendars, earthly models of a cosmic order they strived to understand and appease. San Lorenzo's reign as the premier Olmec city came to a violent and definitive end. Around 900 years before the Common Era, this first great capital, the place where the colossal heads first appeared, was systematically and deliberately destroyed. The archaeological record tells a grim story of intentional ruin. Monuments were not merely toppled, they were meticulously defaced. The majestic stone heads and altars were gouged, their features smashed beyond recognition before being dragged and dumped in long lines across the sacred plazas. Many of these mutilated masterpieces were then buried in long, orderly rows, as if given a formal yet dishonorable interment. This was not the result of a sudden natural disaster or a haphazard invasion by outsiders. The destruction bears the hallmarks of a calculated, ritualized act, a profound rejection of the very symbols of power that had defined San Lorenzo for centuries. So what catastrophic event could cause a people to turn on their own heart, to bury their history so completely? One leading theory points to internal revolt. The staggering labor required to build San Lorenzo and haul its basalt monuments created a society of extreme inequality. The ruling class, likely portrayed in those colossal heads, wielded absolute power. It is possible the burden finally became too great, sparking a popular uprising where the enraged populace sought to erase the physical manifestations of their oppression. They symbolically killed the rulers by destroying their stone counterparts, then buried the old order to make way for something new. Another compelling explanation involves environmental collapse. San Lorenzo was built on a raised plateau in a riverine environment, a feat of early engineering. Yet such landscapes are fragile. Centuries of intensive agriculture to feed a growing population could have led to severe soil depletion and erosion. A shift in the course of the vital Coatzacoalcos River might have disrupted trade and access to water. The very environment that nurtured the city's rise may have turned against it, forcing a desperate and angry population to abandon their home, taking out their fury on the gods and kings who failed them. A third possibility is the rise of a powerful rival. As San Lorenzo flourished, other centers like Venta to the east were growing in influence. Conflict over resources, trade routes, or religious supremacy could have erupted. Perhaps Venta's forces conquered San Lorenzo and ritually desecrated its monuments to transfer spiritual authority to their own city, a common practice in the ancient world. The truth may be a combination of all these factors, a perfect storm of social unrest, ecological stress, and external pressure that shattered the first Olmec capital. The orderly burial of the monument suggests a final, solemn ceremony, a closing of a chapter. But as one great city fell, another was already rising from the swampy mists, ready to inherit the mantle of the Olmec world. The fall of San Lorenzo was not the end of the Olmec story, merely a dramatic shift in its center of power. As the first capital was ritually buried, a new and even more audacious city was rising from the wetlands to the east. This was Venta, a place that takes the Olmec mysteries and magnifies them on an epic scale. Built not on solid ground, but on a narrow, salt dome island surrounded by treacherous swamps and rivers, Venta's very location is a statement of profound intent. Why would a civilization choose to erect its greatest ceremonial complex in such an inhospitable, waterlogged place? The answer lies in a worldview that saw the swamp not as a barrier but as a sacred threshold. In Mesoamerican belief, water and the underworld were intimately connected. By building their city as an island in a primordial sea of muck, the Olmec were physically constructing their world atop the very gateway to the spiritual realm. It was an act of cosmic engineering, a deliberate placement at the junction of the human and the divine. The heart of this island sanctuary was a staggering feat of labor, the Great Pyramid of Venta. Unlike the stone pyramids of Egypt, this colossal structure was built entirely from earth and clay. Shaped like a fluted cone or perhaps a volcanic peak, it rose over 100 feet high, a man-made mountain dominating the flat landscape. Just imagine the effort, basketload by basketload, to pile nearly 100,000 cubic meters of soil onto this island. This pyramid was likely the axis mundi, the central world tree that connected the heavens, the earth, and the watery underworld below. But the true strangeness of Venta lies not just in what was built above ground, but in what was meticulously hidden beneath it. Across the site, the Olmec created elaborate, one-time offerings and then sealed them away forever. The most famous of these is the massive mosaic pavement, a near-perfect rectangle measuring about 15 by 20 feet, composed of nearly 500 finely shaped blocks of serpentine stone. This beautiful, intricate design, resembling a stylized jaguar mask, was not meant for human eyes to admire. After its careful assembly, it was covered with layers of colored clay and buried, a permanent gift to the earth. Elsewhere, caches of exquisite jade celts, figurines, and polished mirrors were arranged in symbolic patterns like votive offerings in a tomb, and then entombed under tons of fill. This practice speaks to a religion of incredible material sacrifice, where the most valued objects were rendered invisible, given back to the spirits of the land. The entire city layout reinforces this sense of sacred order. Its main axis is aligned precisely 8 degrees west of north, an orientation that tracked the sun's journey and tied the city to celestial cycles. Along this axis, monuments were placed with deliberate care, creating a ritual pathway for processions. Enormous stone altars, possibly thrones for rulers, sit near stelae carved with scenes of authority, and yet more colossal heads stand guard. Venta feels less like a living city and more like a vast, open-air temple, a machine for ritual designed to maintain the balance of the cosmos through ceremony and extravagant offering. The society that built it must have been phenomenally centralized and devout, capable of commanding generations of labor for projects that served no practical purpose we can easily grasp, only a spiritual one that was, to them, a matter of survival. What kind of belief compels a people to hide their greatest art and to build their spiritual capital in the middle of a swamp? Venta is that belief, frozen in clay and stone. The silent stone faces and buried offerings of Venta speak a powerful visual language, but they leave us longing for their actual words. Did the Olmec possess a true system of writing, or were their stories told only in symbols and spoken tradition? This question leads to one of the most heated debates in Mesoamerican archaeology, centered on a single, palm-sized artifact. Discovered in a gravel quarry in the state of Veracruz in the late 1990s, it is known as the Cascajal block. It is a rectangular slab of serpentine stone, about the size and thickness of a large textbook, and its surface is inscribed with 62 clearly carved symbols. To some researchers, this is the smoking gun, the earliest example of writing in the entire Americas. The symbols are arranged in horizontal rows, and they show clear signs of a writing system. There is repetition, a discernible syntax or order, and the characters themselves are highly stylized, distinct from the more pictorial art found on monuments. Some of the glyphs resemble plants like maize and insects, while others are abstract shapes. Proponents of its authenticity argue that the block's text, which may date to around 900 years before the Common Era, represents a kind of proto-writing, perhaps a ritual incantation or a record of a significant event. If genuine, it would push back the origin of Mesoamerican writing by at least 400 years, proving the Olmec were not just artists and architects, but also scribes, recording their history and knowledge in a durable form. This would revolutionize our view of their intellectual life, suggesting a level of administrative complexity, record-keeping, and abstract thought on par with the earliest civilizations of the Old World. Yet the Cascajal block is shrouded in profound skepticism. The circumstances of its discovery were not under controlled archaeological conditions. It was found out of context by construction workers, which immediately raises red flags. Many prominent scholars dismiss it as an outright forgery or, more charitably, as a collection of decorative icons without linguistic meaning. They point out that no other example of this script has ever been found at any Olmec site, not a single shard or fragment. For a writing system to function, it must be widespread enough to be read by a class of scribes, yet this block appears utterly alone. Critics argue the symbols could be a clever pastiche of known Olmec motifs arranged to look like writing, or simply a personal notepad for an artisan sketching designs. The debate is fierce because the stakes are so high. If the block is real, it means we have lost an entire library of Olmec thought, their laws, their poetry, their names for the stars. If it is a fake, it is a cruel trick, dangling the promise of a lost voice before us only to snatch it away. For now, the Cascajal block remains an enigmatic outlier, a whisper of literacy that the silent jungle has not yet chosen to confirm. Its mystery forces us to wonder, did the Olmecs speak to each other across the centuries in a script we can no longer read? Or is their true legacy written only in the earth and stone they left behind? The silent symbols of the Cascajal block hint at a mind capable of complex organization, and nowhere is that practical genius more visible than in the earth itself at San Lorenzo. Long before the city's monuments were defaced and buried, its rulers were engaged in a monumental struggle not against enemies but against the elements. The Olmec homeland was not a gentle place. It was a land of torrential seasonal rains and swampy river plains. To build a lasting capital on a plateau, they had to become masters of water itself. Their solution was a network of engineering so advanced it transforms our view of them from mere artists into sophisticated urban planners. Archaeologists have uncovered a vast, intricate system of stone-lined drains, underground conduits, and carefully graded canals crisscrossing the heart of San Lorenzo. This was not a haphazard collection of ditches. These were precisely constructed features, built from tons of imported basalt, designed to control the flow of water with remarkable efficiency. They channeled destructive runoff away from plazas and buildings during heavy storms, preventing erosion and flooding. They likely fed into reservoirs, creating a managed water supply for the dry season. But to see this only as practical plumbing is to miss a deeper layer of meaning. For the Olmec, water was not merely a resource, it was a sacred, animate force. It was the literal lifeblood of the maize plants that fed their people, and it was the physical manifestation of the underworld, the realm of ancestors and fertility spirits. Controlling water was therefore not just an engineering task, it was a priestly duty, a ritual act of balancing cosmic forces. The very act of constructing these stone channels, of directing the flow of sacred rivers through the heart of their city, was likely a powerful demonstration of the ruler's ability to mediate between the people and the chaotic, generative powers of nature. The scale of this work reveals a society capable of staggering social coordination. Moving the earth for the plateau itself was one thing, but quarrying, shaping, and transporting the basalt for miles, then fitting it into functional hydraulic systems required specialized knowledge, long-term planning, and the organized labor of thousands. This suggests a ruling class with the authority to command not just for grand artistic displays, but for sustained, utilitarian projects that ensured the city's survival. The water management system was the unseen, vital architecture that made the visible splendor of San Lorenzo possible. It allowed the population to concentrate, to farm intensively, and to focus their collective energy on creating a civilization. The drains and canals were the practical veins of the city, but in the Olmec mind, they were perhaps also sacred pathways, ritually channeling the essence of the underworld to nourish their world above. The practical genius of their waterworks reveals a society deeply connected to the land, yet their true reach extended far beyond the swamps of home. To acquire the materials that defined their civilization, the Olmec mastered a trade network of astonishing scale and sophistication. From highland Guatemala, they imported vast quantities of obsidian, the volcanic glass essential for razor-sharp tools and ritual blades. From the mountains of Oaxaca, they secured iron ores like magnetite and ilmenite, which they polished into dazzling, mirror-like discs. And from the same distant Guatemalan highlands came their most treasured substance, a stone of profound spiritual power, blue-green jade. The presence of these materials in Olmec cities hundreds of miles from their sources tells a story not of isolated villages, but of a culture with far-flung contacts, organized exchange routes, and a powerful demand that shaped economies across Mesoamerica. This was not simple barter between neighbors, it was a systematic flow of prestige goods, likely controlled by the elite, that brought the symbolic wealth of distant, sacred landscapes into the Olmec heartland. The very existence of this network is a mystery of economic influence. Did Olmec merchants travel these long routes themselves, or did goods pass hand to hand through a chain of intermediaries? Was trade a peaceful exchange, or was it enforced by the threat of Olmec power? The artifacts suggest they were not just participants in a network, they were its driving force for centuries, creating the first pan-Mesoamerican web of material and undoubtedly ideas. This brings us to two of their most enigmatic materials, each with properties that seemed magical. The first is their jade, specifically the translucent blue-green variety known as Olmec blue. Jade is incredibly tough, harder than steel, requiring endless hours of grinding with sand and water to shape. Why would a culture without metal tools devote such staggering effort to a stone so difficult to work? The answer lies in its spiritual meaning. To the Olmec, jade was not just beautiful, it was alive. Its color mirrored the life-giving waters of sacred springs and the lush canopy of the rainforest. It was the stone of maize, of renewal, and of the very breath of life. They carved it into Were-jaguar pendants, celts that symbolized sprouting maize, and elegant ear spools worn by rulers, believing it connected the wearer to the essence of fertility and eternity. The second material is just as fascinating, magnetite. The Olmec polished blocks of this iron ore into concave mirrors, some small enough to hold in the hand. When these mirrors catch the sunlight, they project a brilliant, focused beam, a spot of captured sun. But they hold another invisible secret. Many of these mirrors are naturally magnetic. Imagine the awe of an Olmec priest discovering that a polished stone disc could not only harness the sun's light, but could also mysteriously attract or repel another object without touching it. In a world where magnetism was an unseen force, this property would have been seen as pure sorcery, a tangible manifestation of spiritual energy, or perhaps the animating force of the stars themselves. These mirrors were likely used in divination rituals, their reflective surfaces thought to be portals to other realms, and their magnetic power proof of a connection to the fundamental forces of the cosmos. The enduring mystery surrounding both materials is one of source. Despite decades of searching, archaeologists have never definitively located the exact quarries for Olmec blue jade. The general region in Guatemala is known, but the specific veins they exploited remain hidden, as if the earth swallowed them back up. Similarly, while we know the magnetite came from Oaxaca, the precise deposits are lost. This obscurity adds another layer to their story. It suggests that knowledge of these sacred sources was a closely guarded secret, perhaps known only to a guild of traders or a priesthood who controlled access to the very wellsprings of spiritual power. The trade network, then, was more than an economic system. It was a sacred geography, a physical map of their beliefs, with rivers of precious stone and magnetic ore flowing from distant, holy mountains directly into the hands of the elite, who used them to commune with the universe. The sacred trade in jade and magnetite reveals a world where objects held spiritual power, but the Olmec believed the most potent offering of all came from within the human body itself. Among their most startling artifacts are elegantly carved perforators made of precious jade and spines from stingrays, creatures that inhabit the coastal waters. These were not tools for crafting, but for a profound and painful ritual, bloodletting. The act of drawing one's own blood, typically from the tongue, ears, or genitals using these sacred instruments, was considered the ultimate sacrifice. For the Olmec elite, likely the rulers and priests depicted on the monuments, this was a direct line of communication with the gods and ancestors. The blood, the very essence of life, was offered to nourish and energize the spiritual forces that sustained the world. It was a transaction of cosmic importance, believed to ensure the sun would rise, the rains would fall, and the maize would grow. The use of stingray spines is particularly evocative, as the stingray itself, with its venomous spine-tipped tail, was a creature of both danger and the watery underworld. By using its spine, the ruler was channeling that dangerous underworld power, transforming an act of self-sacrifice into a conduit for supernatural energy. This practice cemented royal authority, proving the leader's willingness to endure ultimate pain for the prosperity of the people, and demonstrating a privileged physical connection to the divine that commoners did not possess. From this visceral, bodily ritual, we turn to a concept of breathtaking intellectual abstraction, the invention of zero. The Olmec numeral system, inherited and refined by later cultures like the Maya, was a bar and dot system. A dot represented 1, a bar represented 5. You could count to 19 with combinations of these symbols, but to write larger numbers like 20 or 400, you needed a way to show place value, to indicate that a symbol was in the 20s place or the 400s place. This requires a placeholder, a symbol for nothing, a zero. The earliest potential evidence for this in the Americas appears on an artifact with deep Olmec connections, the La Mojara stela. This tall stone slab, dating to the 2nd century of the Common Era but bearing a distinctly Olmec-inspired artistic style, contains a long count calendar date. The inscription uses a shell-like glyph to mark positions where no number is present, functioning exactly as a zero placeholder. While the stela itself is later than the classic Olmec period, the mathematical concept it displays likely had much older roots. The implications are staggering. The Olmec, or their immediate cultural heirs, were grappling with the concept of emptiness as a numerical value centuries, if not a millennium, before it appeared in Europe. This was not just counting, it was a leap into pure mathematics, a system capable of recording vast numbers for complex calendar cycles and astronomical calculations. The journey from the physical sting of a stingray spine to the abstract perfection of a zero symbol captures the full spectrum of the Olmec mind, a culture that could find the divine in a drop of blood and the order of the cosmos in the idea of nothing. The abstract concept of zero and the visceral act of bloodletting both point to a world where the spiritual and the physical were intimately, sometimes terrifyingly, intertwined. This brings us to a set of mysteries that reveal the darker, more solemn dimensions of Olmec belief. At the sacred island of Venta, beneath the shadow of the Great Clay Pyramid, archaeologists have uncovered caches of breathtaking strangeness. In one of the most famous offerings, they found a scene frozen in time. A circle of 16 exquisitely carved serpentine figurines, each just a few inches tall, stands facing inward toward two larger, more ornate figures made of jade. The arrangement is not random. It is a tableau, a silent meeting of green stone figures set in the earth over 3,000 years ago. Nearby, other caches contained not scenes but hoards, hundreds of beautifully polished celts or axe-shaped forms made of jade and serpentine, stacked in layers like a spiritual treasury. These were not hidden treasures meant to be retrieved. They were permanent sacrifices buried with meticulous care after a single, profound ceremony. The meaning is elusive. Are the figurines depicting a council of ancestors or gods forever convened in the underworld? Are the celts symbolic seeds, offerings to ensure the eternal renewal of crops and life? Whatever their purpose, these caches represent an almost incomprehensible wealth of labor and material, willingly removed from the human world and given back to the earth, a testament to a faith that demanded the ultimate in material devotion. This practice of offering leads to the most contentious and disturbing mystery in Olmec archaeology, the question of infant sacrifice. At sites like El Manotti, a sacred spring, the preserved remains of very young children have been found alongside ritual objects like rubber balls and jade celts. The evidence is fragmentary and hotly debated, but some scholars interpret these finds as sacrifices to chthonic or underworld water deities. The logic within the framework of Olmec belief is harrowing. Infants in their purity and potential were considered powerful conduits to the spiritual realm. Their tears were linked to rain, and their sacrifice at a spring or other watery location might have been seen as the ultimate offering to appease rain gods or fertility spirits to ensure the cycle of water and life continued. It is a concept that chills the modern soul, yet it cannot be dismissed without examining the full weight of the archaeological context. If true, it reveals a cosmology where the sustenance of the entire community could be believed to hinge on the most extreme, tragic transactions with the divine. A different kind of ritual violence was inflicted not upon people, but upon the stone monuments themselves. Across the Olmec world, from San Lorenzo to Venta, we find a consistent, puzzling pattern: the deliberate mutilation of sculptures. Colossal heads have their noses and lips smashed off, altars are gouged with deep scars, stelae are fractured. This was not the random vandalism of invaders, it was systematic and often followed by a careful burial of the defaced objects. Why would a civilization so painstakingly create these masterpieces only to destroy them? Several theories emerge from the silent evidence. One is ritual killing. In many animistic beliefs, a statue that represents a person or a god can hold its essence, its ixiptla or substitute spirit. When a ruler died or a new cycle began, the old ixiptla might need to be deactivated, its power released or transferred by symbolically killing the stone vessel. The careful burial then becomes a respectful entombment. Another possibility is ancestor veneration, where the mutilation was part of a funerary rite, a way of transitioning the representation of the deceased from the world of the living to the realm of the ancestors. Yet a third, more political interpretation suggests erasure. The defacing could be a deliberate act of damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory, where a new ruler or faction sought to obliterate the legacy of a predecessor by destroying their likeness and burying their political power. Perhaps it was all of these, a complex funerary practice where the stone body of a king was ritually slain, his spirit sent to the ancestors, and his political authority formally interred, making way for a new order. The broken faces stare up from the dirt not with accusation, but with a profound question about the nature of power, memory, and the sacred objects that bridge our world and the next. The rituals of blood and stone were mirrored in a far more dynamic and public spectacle, one that echoed through the courts of every culture that followed. The Olmec are widely credited as the inventors of the great Mesoamerican ballgame, a sport that was so much more than mere entertainment. This was a sacred drama played with a solid rubber ball, a material the Olmec had in abundance from the sapodilla trees of their homeland. They called it Olmecs, and its equipment was as symbolic as its play. Alongside courts found at sites like El Manotti and San Lorenzo, archaeologists have discovered strange stone objects known as hatches. These are carved often in the shape of stylized heads or animals with a thin, axe-like edge. They were not weapons but ritual gear, likely worn on the player's belt or yoke as a ceremonial emblem of status and power. The game itself was brutal and breathtaking. Players, heavily padded with leather and wood, used their hips, thighs, and forearms to keep a heavy rubber ball, sometimes weighing 8 pounds or more, in constant motion, aiming to pass it through a high stone ring or to strike specific markers on the court walls. A single direct hit from the ball could break bones, but the physical danger was the least of its stakes. The ball game was a living metaphor for the cosmos. The solid rubber ball, bouncing with an otherworldly liveliness thanks to the magic of latex, represented the sun, the moon, or perhaps Venus as it journeyed across the sky and into the underworld. The court itself was a model of the universe, its long alley symbolizing the heavens, its walls the boundaries of the world, and its end zones often associated with the celestial or underworld realms. Every bounce and ricochet reenacted the perilous journey of celestial bodies, a battle between the forces of light and darkness, order and chaos. To win was to ensure the sun's victory over the night, to guarantee its rebirth at dawn. To lose could carry consequences far beyond the final score. There is strong evidence that the outcome of these ritual games, particularly high-stakes matches between rival city-states or as part of major ceremonies, could result in human sacrifice. The losing captain, or sometimes the entire losing team, might be offered to the gods, their blood becoming the ultimate payment to sustain the cosmic cycle their game had just dramatized. This transformed the contest into a matter of profound political and religious theater. Rulers were often depicted as ball players, their skill and endurance proving their divine right to rule and their willingness to gamble their very lives for the prosperity of their people. The ballgame was diplomacy, ritual, and cosmic maintenance, all played out in a roaring, dusty court under the watchful eyes of gods and ancestors. The cosmic drama of the ballgame was mirrored in the very creatures that populated the Olmec imagination. Among the most intricate and puzzling of these beings is a magnificent composite monster, a creature so complex scholars often call it the Olmec dragon or the earth monster. This is not a simple animal, but a breathtaking fusion of the entire natural world. Look closely at its depictions on carved celts and monumental sculptures, and you will see the hooked beak and wings of a mighty bird of prey, perhaps an eagle or a harpy eagle. You will see the scaly body and sinuous form of a serpent or a crocodile, and often you will find the snarling brow and powerful limbs of the ever-present jaguar. This is the ultimate chimera, combining the lords of the sky, the water, and the earth into a single, overwhelming entity. Decoding this creature is key to understanding the Olmec vision of creation itself. One powerful interpretation sees the dragon as the personification of the fertile, living earth. Its crocodilian aspect connects it to the rivers and swamps, the source of life and the entrance to the underworld. Its avian features tie it to the heavens and the sun's journey, while its jaguar elements root it in the powerful, shadowy jungle. As a unified being, it could represent the mountain, that primordial place where earth meets sky, from which water flows and life emerges. In this view, the Olmec dragon is not a destructive force, but the animate, nurturing body of the world, a creator from whose substance all things grow. Another compelling theory suggests it represents a very specific, sacred location. Many early civilizations identified a particular mountain as the axis of the world, the place where creation began. For the Olmec, this could have been a prominent peak in the Tuxtla Mountains, the volcanic range that provided the basalt for their colossal heads. This mountain would be seen as a living being, its slopes covered in jungle, its springs feeding rivers, and its summit touching the clouds. The dragon, then, would be the portrait of that sacred geography, a map of their cosmos rendered in animal form. When a ruler is shown seated within the gaping maw of the earth monster on carved altars, he is not being devoured. He is being shown emerging from the womb of the world itself, born from the primordial mountain, claiming his authority directly from the source of all life. This transforms the dragon from a monster of fear into a symbol of ultimate genesis, a reminder that kingship and civilization itself were gifts from the animate earth. This vision of a living earth finds its most perfect physical expression not in a single creature, but in the very layout of their greatest city. At Venta, the Olmec did not just build structures, they orchestrated them. The ceremonial heart of the island, an area archaeologists call Complex A, reveals a design of breathtaking intentionality. Its central axis, a line running through its most important platforms, altars, and buried offerings, is not aligned to true north. Instead, it is oriented precisely 8 degrees west of north. This is not a mistake or a limitation of their astronomy. This deliberate offset is a clue written in the landscape, a permanent pointer frozen in time. One compelling theory suggests this alignment was aimed at the summit of a specific, sacred mountain in the distant Tuxtla Range, perhaps the very mountain they envisioned as the Olmec dragon. On a significant day, the rising or setting sun would have crowned that peak, connecting the city directly to that primordial source of creation. Another possibility is celestial, that the axis tracked the most extreme northerly setting point of a bright star like Capella, marking a pivotal moment in the ritual calendar. But the alignment is just one thread in a grander tapestry. Many researchers believe Complex A is a cosmogram, a giant, three-dimensional model of the Olmec universe. Walking from south to north along this sacred axis would have been a spiritual journey. You would begin in the southern section, an area dominated by a massive, rectangular enclosure made of towering basalt columns. This space, cool and shadowed, likely represented the watery, chaotic underworld, the realm of ancestors and fertile potential. Moving north, you would cross a central plaza, the realm of human activity and ceremony, the living world. Your journey would culminate at the northern limit, where the most elaborate tombs and offerings were placed. This northern zone, associated with the celestial north and its unchanging pole star, symbolized the heavens, the realm of cosmic order and eternal gods. The entire complex, then, was a machine for ritual procession, allowing priests and rulers to physically traverse the cosmos, moving from the darkness of creation through the present world and toward the eternal sky. Every buried cache of jade, every positioned stela, and every aligned platform was a piece of this cosmological map. To stand on that axis was to stand at the center of everything, with the entire universe from the underworld to the stars laid out at your feet in stone and earth. Those colossal stone faces, with their powerful features, have sparked one of the most persistent and controversial debates surrounding the Olmec. The broad, flat noses, the thick, fleshy lips, and the wide, rounded faces of the monumental heads do not resemble the typical indigenous features of later Mesoamerican peoples. This striking visual difference has, for decades, fueled sensational theories that the Olmec must have had direct contact with, or even originated from ancient African civilizations. The idea is captivating, suggesting a transatlantic voyage long before Columbus, but it crumbles under the weight of scientific evidence and a deeper understanding of artistic tradition. Modern genetic studies of ancient Olmec remains show no biological connection to African populations, instead firmly linking them to the ancestral Native American peoples who crossed the Bering Land Bridge. So if these heads are not portraits of Africans, what are we actually looking at? The answer lies in moving beyond literal interpretation and into the realm of stylized art and cultural ideals. The Olmec artistic canon was not about photographic realism. It was a symbolic language exaggerating certain features to convey specific meanings about power, identity, and essence. The broad nose and full lips may be deliberate exaggerations of local physical traits, but more importantly, they are likely symbols of breath, speech, and life force. In many Mesoamerican cultures, the breath was synonymous with the soul. A powerfully rendered mouth and nose on a ruler's portrait would signify his potent life essence and his authoritative voice, the commands that organized society. The distinctive helmet-like headgear each head wears is another clue, this one pointing to the ritual ballgame. These helmets strongly resemble the protective gear worn by players in that sacred sport. By depicting a ruler with this headgear, the Olmec were connecting his authority to the cosmic drama of the ballgame, showing him as a champion who maintained the world's balance. Furthermore, the closed, sometimes downturned mouths and heavy-lidded eyes project an aura of serene, immutable power, a stoic endurance meant to inspire awe and submission. These faces are not meant to be racial identifiers, they are carefully crafted icons of leadership. They tell us that Olmec ideals of beauty and authority were rooted in concepts of spiritual potency, athletic prowess, and an unshakable, eternal presence. The heads were designed to be seen from below, their imposing features looming over the viewer, a permanent declaration of a social order where the ruler was a monumental, almost geological fact of life. The true mystery here is not about foreign contact, but about the specific local language of power they invented in stone, a language we are still learning to read. The stoic faces of the colossal heads may project serene authority, but the Olmec spiritual world was anything but static. It was a realm of profound transformation where the boundaries of perception were deliberately dissolved. A key to entering this realm may have been the deliberate use of powerful psychoactive substances, placing altered states of consciousness at the very heart of their religious practice. Archaeological evidence provides startling clues. At the Olmec site of San Lorenzo, researchers discovered the skeletal remains of the Bufo marinus, the giant marine toad. This is no ordinary amphibian. Its parotoid glands secrete a milky venom containing a potent cocktail of chemicals, including 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine and bufotenin, powerful psychoactive compounds that can induce intense, often terrifying, visionary states when properly prepared and administered. The mere presence of these toad remains in a ritual context suggests the Olmec were not just aware of its properties, they were harnessing them. This is corroborated by the art itself. Numerous Olmec figurines and carvings depict individuals in poses and with expressions we would instantly recognize as trance-like. Figures are shown with heads thrown back, eyes rolled upward or closed, and bodies contorted or limp, as if in the throes of a powerful visionary journey. Some appear to be vomiting, a common physical reaction to potent hallucinogenic brews, interpreted not as illness but as a purging of the profane self to make way for the sacred. These were likely depictions of shamans or priests in the act of crossing the veil. In this context, the use of substances like toad venom was not recreational, it was a sacred technology. It provided a direct, visceral pathway to the spirit world, allowing the shaman to commune with animal allies, ancestors, and deities. They could descend into the underworld to retrieve knowledge, diagnose spiritual illness, or plead for rain and fertility on behalf of the community. For the ruling elite, this practice was a cornerstone of power, a leader who could successfully navigate these dangerous psychic voyages and return with divine mandates held unassailable authority. His visions dictated the timing of ceremonies, the location of sacred offerings, and the very laws of the people. The ritual use of psychedelics transformed the leader into a living conduit, his body a vessel for messages from the other side. This deep need to breach the limits of ordinary reality reveals a culture that saw the cosmos as layered and accessible, but only to those brave enough to shatter their own minds to perceive it. The profound visionary journeys of their shamans could not ultimately shield the Olmec from the slow, relentless pressures of their own environment. Around 400 years before the Common Era, the great island sanctuary of Venta, the spiritual heart of their world for centuries, was deliberately and permanently abandoned. Unlike the violent, angry destruction that befell San Lorenzo, the end of Venta appears to have been a solemn, orderly ceremony, a final ritual performed by its own people. The evidence is hauntingly clear. The majestic monuments were not toppled in rage but carefully defaced. Colossal heads and altars had their features systematically removed before being laid to rest in long, neat rows and buried under layers of earth. The great mosaic pavements and precious caches of jade were sealed under even more fill, as if the city was being gently put to sleep, its eyes closed to the world forever. This was not an invasion, it was a termination, a conscious decision to end the chapter. So what could compel a civilization to ritually bury its own capital? One of the most compelling theories points to an environmental crisis. Venta existed in a fragile, waterlogged balance. A major shift in the course of the surrounding rivers, or a period of intense drought followed by catastrophic flooding, could have destabilized the entire ecosystem. The swamp that was its spiritual foundation could have become its physical tomb, with rising waters making the island uninhabitable or ruining the agricultural lands that fed its population. The careful burial of monuments might have been a desperate attempt to appease the angry water gods, or a respectful farewell to a sacred place that nature was reclaiming. Another possibility is a profound social and religious revolution. The staggering labor and material wealth demanded by Venta's elite to build pyramids and bury priceless jade may have finally bred resentment and disbelief. If droughts or famines struck, the people might have lost faith in the rulers and priests who claimed to control the cosmos. A new religious movement could have arisen, rejecting the old gods and their costly island temple. The defacement and burial would then be an act of theological reform, decommissioning the old spiritual machinery in a controlled manner before the population simply walked away to a new way of life. There is also the likelihood of a strategic demographic shift. Power in Mesoamerica was always flowing. As the Olmec heartland declined, perhaps due to resource exhaustion or silted rivers, new centers were rising in the highlands of Oaxaca and the Valley of Mexico. The descendants of the Olmec, carrying their calendar, their ballgame, and their artistic traditions, may have simply migrated to these more promising regions, joining or founding new cities like Monte Alban. Venta's termination ritual would then be a final act of closure, a spiritual locking of the doors as the people moved their cultural capital elsewhere. The civilization did not vanish in a single cataclysm, it faded, its essence seeping into the fabric of the cultures that followed. The last caretakers of Venta buried its stone faces, turned their backs on the great clay pyramid, and walked into the jungle, leaving the axis of their world to be swallowed by silence and roots. The silence that settled over Venta was not an end but a transformation. The Olmec did not vanish, they dissolved like a great river into a delta, their ideas flowing outward to nourish every civilization that grew in their wake. Their legacy became the bedrock of Mesoamerican thought, a cultural DNA so fundamental it is visible in the bones of empires that rose centuries later. Take the Maya, whose glorious cities like Tikal and Palenque seem a world apart from the swampy Olmec heartland. Yet the Maya pantheon is filled with echoes of the old gods. Their powerful rain deity, Chok, with his reptilian features and curling snout, is a direct descendant of the Olmec Were-jaguar and dragon imagery, transformed over time but still bearing that same fusion of animal power. The Maya played the same ritual ball game on courts that were grander architectural versions of the early Olmec layouts for the same cosmic stakes, and they wrote dates using the long count calendar, a complex system of timekeeping that finds its earliest roots in Olmec astronomical observations and their possible use of a place value system. The Olmec gave the Maya the very concept of recording history in deep time. To the west, in the highlands of Oaxaca, the Zapotec civilization built their magnificent city of Monte Albon atop a flattened mountain. There, around 500 years before the Common Era, they erected stone slabs carved with strange, contorted figures known as the danzantes or the dancers. These figures, though stylistically Zapotec, depict captives in poses of defeat and sacrifice, a theme of monumental art that the Olmec pioneered with their own carvings of subdued figures and rulers. More strikingly, the Zapotec adopted and refined the 260-day sacred calendar, using it for divination and ritual scheduling just as the Olmec likely did. The flow of ideas also moved north to the colossal city of Teotihuacan in the Valley of Mexico. While Teotihuacan's culture was distinct, its very urban plan, with its central axis aligned to celestial events and its massive pyramidal structures like the Pyramid of the Sun, follows a blueprint of sacred city planning that the Olmec first laid out at La Venta. The idea of a city as a cosmogram, a physical model of the universe, is an Olmec invention that Teotihuacan executed on a staggering scale. This raises a profound question about the nature of their influence. How did these ideas travel so far and embed themselves so deeply? Was it through Olmec colonization, where warrior priests established outposts and imposed their worldview? The evidence does not support a military empire. Instead, it points to something more subtle and enduring, the spread of a supremely powerful religious ideology. Think of it not as conquest by sword, but conquest by concept. The Olmec package of beliefs, the Were-jaguar shaman, the ballgame as cosmic drama, the pyramid as world mountain, and the calendar as a divine script, offered a complete and compelling explanation of the universe. It provided rulers everywhere with a toolkit for legitimacy, linking their power to the cycles of the sun and the fertility of the earth. This ideology likely spread along the same routes as Olmec trade goods, carried by merchants, pilgrims, and elite emissaries who exchanged jade, obsidian, and ideas. A Maya king wearing a jade pendant in the shape of an Olmec god was not just displaying wealth, he was tapping into an ancient, potent source of authority. The Olmec became the mythic ancestors, the source of primal knowledge for all who came after. Theirs was not a legacy of borders or dynasties, but one of imagination, a set of stories about the world so convincing that they shaped a continent's dreams for 1,000 years. Among the many treasures the Olmec left behind, one artifact stands out for its exquisite beauty and cryptic message. This is the Kunt's axe, a masterpiece of Jade carving discovered over a century ago and now housed in the American Museum of Natural History. It is not an axe for chopping wood, but a ceremonial object, a celt, shaped into the form of a stylized Were-jaguar face. Its smooth, polished surface is a deep, translucent green, and its size, about the length of a man's hand from wrist to fingertip, makes it perfect for holding during a sacred rite. The face itself is a classic Olmec fusion, with the broad, downturned mouth of the Were-jaguar and the slitted, almond-shaped eyes that seem to gaze inward. But the true mystery is not just in its shape, it is etched across its surface in a web of fine, intricate carvings. These are not random decorations, they are a deliberate and complex code. On one side, a pattern of crossed bands like a woven mat covers the forehead. This symbol is a well-known Mesoamerican glyph for political authority, the mat being the literal seat of a ruler's power. Below it, running down the center of the face, is a deep cleft, a feature often associated with the sacred maize god and the fertile earth splitting open to give life. The other side of the axe reveals an even more puzzling scene. Here we see a figure, perhaps a shaman or a deity, emerging from a jagged, tooth-like maw that represents a cave or a mountain portal. This figure holds what looks like a bundle or an elaborate scepter, a clear emblem of office. So what was this beautiful, dense object actually for? One theory is that it was a cache object, meant to be buried as a supreme offering to the earth, its symbolism feeding directly into the underworld. Its compact, handheld form suggests it could have been used in a bloodletting ritual, a ruler holding it as he performed the sacred act, the Jade connecting his sacrifice to the eternal power of the earth and the jaguar spirit. Another interpretation sees it as a literal badge of office, a scepter carried by a ruler during ceremonies to physically manifest his connection to the mythic ancestors and his right to speak for them. The most fascinating reading of all, however, views the entire object as a three-dimensional map or a cosmological diagram. The Were-jaguar face is the living earth itself. The cleft is the central axis, the world tree or the sacred mountain. The carved figure emerging from the cave maw is the ruler, shown in the act of being born from the womb of the world, taking his authority directly from the source. The crossed bands on the forehead then become the celestial pattern, the ordered sky above the fertile earth. In this single, palm-sized piece of jade, the Olmec may have encapsulated their entire universe, the journey from the chaotic underworld to the ordered heavens, with the righteous ruler as the conduit between them. The Kunt's axe is not just an artwork, it is a portable universe, a summary of their beliefs carved in the most precious stone they knew. That portable universe of jade was carved by a people intimately bound to the coast, and the sea itself may hold their earliest secrets. Along the shores of the Gulf of Mexico, where Veracruz meets the water, a tantalizing mystery is slowly emerging from the waves. Fishermen and archaeologists have reported strange, geometric shapes visible beneath the clear coastal waters, formations that look unnaturally straight and rectangular against the sandy seabed. Sonar surveys have revealed what appear to be large, man-made mounds and potential building foundations resting on what was once dry land, now submerged under several meters of ocean. The theory is both simple and profound. At the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago, global sea levels were significantly lower. The Gulf Coast extended much farther out, creating a broad, fertile coastal plain rich in resources. As the glaciers melted, the seas rose steadily, gradually swallowing this ancient shoreline over millennia. If the Olmec or their direct ancestors established early settlements along this now vanished coast, those sites would have been slowly inundated and forgotten, preserved in the silent, sediment-rich waters of the Gulf. The potential discovery of true Olmec structures underwater would be a revolution, not merely an addition to the map. It would force us to completely reconsider the cradle of their civilization. Were their first villages not in the river valleys, but on this lost coastal plain, exploiting rich marine resources and lagoons before they moved inland to places like San Lorenzo? These sunken sites could be the missing link, the very origins of Olmec culture now lying offshore. Exploring these leads, however, is a monumental challenge. Underwater archaeology in the Gulf is fraught with difficulty. Visibility can be poor, currents are strong, and the sediment is constantly shifting, covering and uncovering artifacts. It requires specialized teams, expensive equipment like submersibles and advanced sonar, and painstaking excavation techniques to carefully sift through seabed layers. Any organic materials like wood or textiles would have long since dissolved, leaving only stone foundations, pottery shards, and perhaps offerings of jade or shell. Yet the potential reward is worth the immense effort. A confirmed underwater Olmec settlement would unlock a new chapter in their story. It could reveal early trade networks that used coastal canoe routes long before overland paths were established. It might show a greater reliance on maritime resources, from deep-sea fishing to salt harvesting, that funded their initial rise. Most importantly, it would provide a tangible environmental reason for their later inward migration, as the creeping sea slowly claimed their ancestral homes, pushing them to master the rivers and swamps we associate with them today. These ghostly outlines on the ocean floor are more than ruins. They are a sunken coastline of memory, holding the blueprint of a civilization's first steps. The silent stone portraits of rulers tell one story of power, but a different kind of face, small enough to hold in your hand, tells another. Scattered across Olmec sites like Venta and San Lorenzo, archaeologists have unearthed a curious collection of ceramic figurines that simply do not fit. Their style is distinctly foreign, bearing the artistic fingerprints of distant highland cultures from places like the Valley of Mexico or Oaxaca. Unlike the classic Olmec figures with their fleshy features and Were-jaguar motifs, these visitors in clay have angular faces, different hairstyles, and unique postures. They are not hidden in sacred caches, but often found in what appear to be residential areas. The most compelling interpretation is that these are not Olmec art at all, but representations of actual people from far away, left behind like diplomatic calling cards. We might call them the ambassador figurines. Their presence suggests a fascinating reality, that Olmec cities were cosmopolitan hubs where foreign emissaries, merchants, and perhaps skilled artisans lived for periods of time. Imagine a highland trader from a budding Zapotec community, journeying for weeks along rugged trails to reach the great swamp island of Venta. He comes bearing obsidian, iron ore, or exotic feathers. In return, he receives the prized Olmec blue jade, rubber, or cacao. To commemorate his journey, or perhaps as a gift to his hosts, a figurine in the style of his homeland is crafted, either brought with him or made by an Olmec artist familiar with foreign styles. These small clay figures are therefore physical evidence of a vast living network. They prove that the Olmec world was not a closed, isolated culture, but a central node in an early web of Mesoamerican interaction. This was not mere barter at the border, it was sustained face-to-face contact. The implications are profound. Where goods flow, ideas travel faster. A Zapotec ambassador living in Venta would not only trade stones, he would absorb the Olmec cosmology. He would witness the ballgame, learn the basics of the sacred calendar, and see the power of the Were-jaguar iconography. When he returned home, he carried these concepts with him, planting the seeds that would later blossom into the great highland civilizations. The Olmec, in turn, would have learned from their guests, perhaps adopting new artistic techniques, stories of distant landscapes, or even medicinal knowledge from the highlands. These figurines transform our view of their reach from one of vague influence to one of active, sophisticated diplomacy. They hint at protocols of hospitality, gift exchange, and mutual recognition between emerging elites across the region. The Olmec heartland was not just a producer of culture, it was a grand clearinghouse, a place where the future of Mesoamerica was quietly negotiated in clay, stone, and spoken word. These clay ambassadors from distant lands suggest a world of open exchange, a network thriving on connection rather than conquest. This leads to a profound physical mystery etched into the landscape itself. When you walk through the sprawling plazas of San Lorenzo or the sacred precincts of Venta, you notice something strikingly absent. There are no towering defensive walls encircling these cities. No obvious bastions guard their approaches. No carvings glorify battlefield victories or the capture of enemies, at least not in the explicit ways seen in later Maya or Aztec art. For a civilization that commanded such immense labor and wealth, this lack of fortification is deeply puzzling. In the ancient world, walls were not just practical, they were psychological necessities, declarations of fear and possession. From the ramparts of Jericho to the citadels of Mycenae, societies built barriers. The Olmec, it seems, did not. So what does this silent architecture tell us? One compelling possibility is that the Olmec heartland experienced a rare and extended period of internal peace, a pax Olmeca enforced by a shared ideology and a dominant central authority. If their religious and political system was so universally accepted across the region, if the ruling elite at places like Venta held uncontested spiritual and economic sway, then large-scale warfare between Olmec cities may have been unnecessary. Conflict could have been resolved through ritual, diplomacy, or the sheer gravitational pull of their cultural influence. Their security might have been maintained not by stone walls, but by the powerful idea that to attack a major ceremonial center was to attack the cosmic order itself. Another, more unsettling interpretation is that the Olmec were simply so overwhelmingly powerful that no credible external threat existed for centuries. Their control over the flow of prestige goods like jade and magnetite, and their presumed authority over lesser settlements, could have created a hegemony so complete that building walls was seen as a sign of weakness, not strength. Their monuments were their fortifications, projecting an image of immutable, God-given power that deterred aggression. Yet, archaeologists caution that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Perhaps their warfare took a form we do not yet recognize. What if their conflicts were primarily ritualized, centered on the sacred ballgame, where the outcome of a match decided territorial disputes or access to resources, rendering mass battles obsolete? Or what if their expression of militarism was not in carvings of battles, but in the ritual capture and sacrifice of individuals shown on some stelae, a form of conflict that targeted leaders and deities rather than armies and cities? There is also the practical consideration of their environment. Building massive earthen pyramids and transporting 20-ton stone heads required every ounce of communal labor. In a land of swamps and rivers, perhaps the terrain itself provided a natural defense, making traditional walls less effective and diverting all human effort toward monumental works that served both spiritual and political needs. The open plazas and unwalled complexes stand as a quiet challenge to our assumptions. They force us to consider that the Olmec may have forged a different kind of authority, one built less on fear of the outsider and more on the binding power of a shared cosmic vision. Their greatest defense may not have been stone but belief. This profound sense of peace in their cities extends to their most intimate spaces, the tombs where they laid their dead to rest. The Olmec did not leave us written prayers or descriptions of paradise, but they carefully furnished their graves, building a bridge to the next world with the most precious materials they possessed. At Venta, deep within the sacred precinct, archaeologists uncovered a burial of staggering opulence known simply as Tomb A. Inside a stone-lined crypt, they found the remains of 2 young men, possibly elite priests or even members of a ruling family. They were not alone in their journey. Surrounding them was a fortune in spiritual currency, hundreds of polished celts and figurines carved from luminous jade and serpentine, arranged in deliberate patterns. This was not mere wealth display, it was a carefully packed suitcase for eternity. Each piece of jade, the stone of life and water, was a battery of spiritual energy intended to sustain and empower the souls in the afterlife. The arrangement itself held meaning, with many celts placed in stacks or rows, perhaps symbolizing a field of sprouting maize, a promise of rebirth and nourishment in the realm beyond. From these physical offerings, we can begin to reconstruct their vision of the soul's journey. A recurring and powerful symbol across Olmec art is the cruciform shape, a cross or world tree marking the 4 cardinal directions. This was not a Christian symbol, but a map of the cosmos. The Olmec saw the world as divided into 4 quarters, each associated with a color, a deity, and specific attributes, all revolving around a central 5th point, the axis mundi. This axis was often represented as a great tree or a mountain, like the pyramid at Venta, connecting the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. When a person died, their soul likely embarked on a perilous voyage through this layered universe. The cruciform symbol may have served as both a guide and a destination. The rich jade offerings in tomb provided the spiritual sustenance needed for this travel. The soul might have needed to navigate the four directions, facing challenges or gathering blessings from each quarter, before it could ascend the central axis to join the ancestors in a celestial realm, or perhaps descend into a fertile underworld not of punishment, but of potential and regeneration. The presence of the Were-jaguar imagery in graves is another crucial clue. The jaguar, as master of the night and the underworld, was the perfect psychopomp, a spirit guide for the dead. A soul accompanied by jade carved in the jaguar's image would have a powerful protector for the dark passages ahead. This entire cosmology suggests the Olmec viewed death not as an end, but as a transformation and a relocation within a living, structured cosmos. The deceased became an ancestor, a force that could still influence the world of the living, provided they were properly equipped and sent on their way with correct ritual. The tomb was not a sealed box, but a portal, and every piece of jade was a key. The silent tombs filled with jade speak of a journey after death, but the living Olmec embarked on journeys of staggering earthly effort that defy belief. This brings us to a mystery not of belief, but of brute force and brilliant logistics, the technological marvel of moving mountains. Those colossal heads and massive altars were not carved from local stone. The basalt, that dense, dark volcanic rock, came from a single, specific source, the Tuxtla Mountains. These rugged peaks rise from the coastal plain dozens of miles away from the great Olmec centers. From the quarries to San Lorenzo, the distance is over 50 miles. To La Venta, it is even farther, and between them lay a nightmarish obstacle course of dense, trackless rainforest, treacherous swamps, and wide, unpredictable rivers. Yet, the Olmec moved blocks of stone weighing up to 20 tons, and some altar stones perhaps twice that, across this impossible landscape. How did a people without the wheel, without metal tools, and without domesticated beasts of burden achieve this? The answer is a testament to pure human ingenuity and relentless social organization. The journey likely began at the quarry itself, where workers used stone hammers and fire setting, heating the rock and then dousing it with water to cause fractures, to pry these gigantic monoliths from the mountainside. Once free, the real challenge commenced. The most plausible theory involves a multi-stage process, a masterpiece of pre-industrial engineering. First, the raw block would have been dragged on a sledge, likely made from sturdy logs, down from the mountains to the nearest waterway. Teams of hundreds, pulling with ropes made from tough agave fibers, would inch the sledge forward over a path of constantly repositioned log rollers. This method alone, moving a 20-ton stone just a few miles over uneven ground, would take weeks of coordinated, back-breaking labor. But the true stroke of genius was their use of the region's waterways. During the rainy season, rivers swell and flood the low-lying areas. The Olmec, masters of their watery world, likely transported these stones significant distances by raft. Imagine constructing a massive raft of buoyant balsa logs, carefully rolling the basalt block aboard, and then poling and guiding this incredibly heavy, unstable vessel downriver. They would have had to navigate currents, sandbars, and shifting channels, a feat of nautical skill we rarely attribute to them. For the final overland leg to the city center, where rivers could not reach, the system of rollers and ropes would begin again, now through sticky mud and across open plazas. Every step of this process required precise coordination, a steady supply of food and water for the workers, and leaders with the vision to see a finished monument in a raw mountain slab. This was not just engineering, it was the ultimate expression of social control. To mobilize and sustain a labor force of hundreds, perhaps thousands, for a single artistic project required a society that believed utterly in the purpose of that project. The ruler who commanded this effort was proving his divine mandate through the very scale of the obedience he could summon. The transported stone was more than material, it was solidified authority. proof that the will of the elite could literally move mountains and reshape the landscape to their vision. The colossal heads were not just portraits, they were the final line in an epic poem written in sweat, rope, and river current. A poem about what humans can achieve when united by a common, compelling belief. The immense effort of moving stone reveals a people deeply attuned to the forces of nature, forces they often depicted in the sinuous forms of serpents and the armored bodies of crocodilians. These creatures coil and crawl through Olmec art with a frequency that demands explanation, for they are far more than decorative animals. They are profound symbols of the very foundation of the world. The snake, with its ability to shed its skin and emerge renewed, was a universal emblem of regeneration and cyclical time. But for the Olmec, living in a land defined by rivers and swamps, the serpent took on a more specific, vital meaning. It became the living embodiment of water itself, the winding river, the flowing spring, the lifeblood of the maize fields. A serpent carved on a ceremonial celt is not just a snake, it is a prayer for fluidity and renewal, a depiction of the essential, moving force that made their civilization possible. Yet the most powerful aquatic symbol was not the serpent alone, but its more formidable cousin, the crocodilian. The Olmec lived alongside the powerful caiman, a relative of the crocodile that ruled their waterways. This creature, a true monster of the primordial world, became one of their most potent icons. It represented the raw, untamed, and dangerous aspect of water and the earth before order was imposed. The caiman was a lord of the muddy, chaotic underworld from which all life ultimately sprang. This symbolism reaches its most breathtaking scale at Venta, in the form of a monumental altar known as Altar 4. This isn't a small offering table, it is a colossal block of basalt carved into the shape of a mythic crocodilian. From its gaping maw emerges a human figure, cradled in the creature's jaws as if being born. This is no scene of violence, but one of profound genesis. The figure, likely a ruler or a founding ancestor, is shown emerging from the womb of the earth itself, represented by the primeval caiman. The message is unmistakable. Political authority is not a human invention. It is a natural force delivered directly from the most ancient and powerful source. This imagery created a powerful foundation myth for Olmec kingship. By depicting themselves as the children of the earth monster, rulers claimed a divine right that was rooted in the landscape itself. They were not merely administrators, they were literal offspring of the swamp and the river, the human manifestation of the fertile, dangerous world that sustained their people. This connection was likely acted out in dramatic rituals. We can envision a ceremony where a ruler, perhaps wearing a headdress of crocodilian scales, would reenact this emergence, stepping from a symbolic cave or a temple doorway shaped like a monstrous mouth. In doing so, he would momentarily become the myth, proving his unique role as the bridge between the chaotic, creative power of the underworld and the ordered, human world of the city and the cornfield. The serpent and the crocodilian, therefore, were bookends of a sacred concept. The serpent was the benevolent, circulating water that nourished daily life. The crocodilian was the terrifying, foundational source of that water, a force that had to be respected and appeased. Together, they framed the Olmec universe as a place born from wet, chthonic darkness, a world where true power meant maintaining a respectful, ritualized dialogue with the deep, ancient creatures of the mud. These creatures of mud and myth ultimately faced the same fate as the rivers they symbolized, not vanishing but flowing into new channels. The final, overarching mystery of the Olmec is not one of a cataclysmic end, but of a profound transformation. They did not disappear in a single, dramatic event like a city swallowed by the earth. Instead, their civilization underwent a gradual process of dispersal and cultural osmosis, a fading not into nothingness but into the fabric of Mesoamerica itself. The archaeological record shows a slow depopulation of their great heartland centers like Venta around 400 years before the Common Era. People did not perish en masse, they simply left. They migrated, likely in family groups and small communities, away from the environmentally stressed river valleys and swamps, seeking new opportunities in the emerging highland regions. They carried with them the most portable and vital elements of their culture, not the colossal heads, but the knowledge in their minds and the beliefs in their hearts. This migration was not a retreat, it was a diaspora of ideas. In the fertile valleys of Oaxaca, these Olmec-descended communities likely contributed to the rising Zapotec state at Monte Alban. You can see their influence in the early use of the sacred calendar and in certain artistic motifs among the Zapotecs' own developing style. In the basin of Mexico, their cosmological concepts of sacred mountains and watery underworlds found a new, monumental expression in the staggering city of Teotihuacan. The Olmec ballgame became a pan-Mesoamerican ritual. Their veneration of Jade became a universal symbol of elite status, and their complex pantheon of shape-shifting gods evolved into the deities worshipped by the Maya and others. Their biological DNA mingled with that of neighboring groups, becoming inseparable from the broader population of ancient Mexico. So, the ultimate answer to their fate is this: the Olmec as a distinct political entity faded, but their civilization never died. It achieved a kind of immortality through its children. They became the ancestors in the truest sense, their ideas so successful, so fundamentally compelling, that they ceased to be called Olmec and simply became the way the world was understood. The silent stone faces in the jungle are not tombstones but seeds, and from those seeds a continent of cultures grew. That legacy of transformation is not locked in the ancient past. It lives on in the voices and stories of the people who still call this land home. While the classical Olmec civilization faded, their cultural DNA did not vanish. It was inherited, adapted, and carried forward by the indigenous cultures that followed, and echoes of it can still be heard today. This final mystery connects those silent stone faces to the vibrant, living traditions of modern communities. One of the most profound connections lies in language. The Olmec themselves almost certainly spoke an early form of what linguists call the Mixozoquian language family. This is not a guess, it is a deduction from the historical record. When Spanish missionaries arrived in the 16th century, they documented that the dominant languages across the old Olmec heartland were varieties of Mix and Zoque. The geographical overlap is too perfect to be coincidence. These modern languages are the direct descendants of the tongues spoken by the builders of La Venta and San Lorenzo. Think about that for a moment. When a modern Zoque elder speaks, the very rhythm and structure of that speech carries a ghost of the language that once coordinated the moving of colossal heads. Place names in the region, the names of rivers and mountains that appear in ancient myths, often have roots in these languages, tying the landscape itself to its original Olmec names. This linguistic continuity is a direct thread, however frayed by time, connecting the present to that deep past. The connections grow even stronger when we listen to the myths. The grand epic of the Maya, the Popol Vuh, tells the story of the hero twins who descend into the dark underworld of Xibalba to outwit the gods of death and ultimately bring about the dawn of humanity. This foundational tale, central to Maya identity, shows striking parallels to themes in much older Olmec art. While the Maya refined the story, the core concept of a dangerous journey to the underworld, a ball game played against gods, and a triumphant resurrection that ensures the world's renewal feels deeply Olmec in its spirit. The Olmec veneration of the Were-jaguar and the earth monster as rulers of a fertile, dangerous underworld provided the primordial soil from which the Maya story grew. Similarly, the Maya worshipped a beautiful, youthful maize god who was killed and reborn, symbolizing the cycle of the corn harvest. This deity's origins can be traced back to Olmec imagery of figures with sprouting maize growing from their heads, or the cleft in the head of the Were-jaguar, which itself represented the fertile earth splitting open for new growth. The Olmec did not invent the full-fledged maize god, but they created the symbolic vocabulary, the visual grammar that later cultures used to describe him. For the modern indigenous communities living in the states of Veracruz and Tabasco, the Olmec are not a distant archaeological curiosity. They are often understood as los antepasados, the ancestors. While specific oral traditions directly naming the Olmec are rare after 3,000 years, there is a powerful sense of deep history embedded in the land itself. Local guides from communities near sites like La Venta or Tres Zapotes often speak of the monuments with a sense of communal patrimony. The colossal heads are sometimes referred to with familiar, respectful nicknames, and stories circulate about their discovery, weaving them into the local history of the last century. More importantly, the core values that the Olmec expressed, a reverence for the natural world, for the sacredness of water and maize, and a belief in a living landscape populated by powerful spirits, resonate strongly with enduring indigenous worldviews. The modern curandero or healer who uses traditional plants and speaks to the spirits of the mountain is walking a path that an Olmec shaman would recognize. The community festival that gives thanks for the rain and the corn harvest is, in its essence, a continuation of the same cosmic contract the Olmec sought to maintain through their colossal offerings. The Olmec did not leave us a chronicle of their kings or a declaration of their gods. Instead, they left a blueprint for a civilization, a set of foundational ideas so powerful that they became the common heritage of a continent. Their story does not end with an abandoned city, but with a conversation that has never stopped, a conversation between the past and the present, spoken in the languages they first shaped, celebrated in the myths they inspired, and felt in the enduring respect for the land they first called sacred. They are the silent, stone-faced grandparents of Mesoamerica, and their memory is kept alive not in museums alone, but in the living heart of the cultures that remember, in their own way, where they came from. But this powerful legacy of the Olmec has also made them a target. Their very mysteries, the gaps in our understanding, have become a canvas for modern myths and sensational claims that often overshadow their true story. A host of pseudoarchaeological theories have latched onto the Olmec, from claims that the colossal heads were carved with extraterrestrial laser tools to assertions that they are proof of ancient transatlantic voyages from Africa or even the lost civilization of Atlantis. These ideas are compelling narratives, but they share a common, deeply flawed foundation, a refusal to credit the indigenous people of the Americas with their own genius. Take the notion that the heads are portraits of African kings. Proponents point to the broad facial features as undeniable proof. Yet as we explored, this ignores the entire Olmec artistic language of stylization and symbolic power. It reduces a sophisticated iconography of authority to a simplistic racial reading, while genetic evidence conclusively shows the Olmec were ancestrally Native American. More insidiously, it perpetuates an old colonial idea that the magnificent cultures of the Americas could not have arisen independently, that they needed an outside, often implicitly superior, civilization to give them a spark. The same logic applies to the idea of Atlantean architects or alien engineers. The argument usually hinges on a single question: how could a primitive people move 20-ton stones without modern technology? The answer, as we've seen, is not a mystery. It is a testament to human ingenuity, organized labor, and sheer determination. We have clear archaeological evidence for quarrying techniques, for the use of log rollers, ropes, and river transport. To invoke aliens is to dismiss the monumental achievement of thousands of Olmec workers, their coordinated effort over months, their profound belief that drove them. These fringe theories persist for several seductive reasons. They offer simple, dramatic answers to complex questions. It is easier to imagine a spaceship than to comprehend the social machinery needed to command such labor. They often carry a romantic appeal, weaving the Olmec into a global tapestry of ancient mysteries that feels more exciting than the slow, meticulous work of archaeology. And unfortunately, they sometimes cater to a desire to rewrite history for nationalist or ideological purposes, to claim a glorious alternative past. The real cost of these distractions is high. They steal attention from the genuine, awe-inspiring reality of the Olmec accomplishment. By chasing phantom Atlanteans, we overlook the profound meaning of the Were-jaguar, the mathematical leap of the zero concept, and the spiritual depth of the buried offerings. We miss the true story, which is far more remarkable, a story of human societies on this continent developing world-class art, astronomy, and urban planning entirely on their own, in conversation with their own environment and gods. The Olmec do not need invented helpers from stars or sunken continents. Their legacy is secure in the colossal heads they carved with stone tools, in the pyramids they built basket by basket, and in the cosmic ideas that grew from their swamps and took root across a continent. That is a mystery worthy of our wonder, not because it is unexplained, but because it was achieved by people not so different from us, right here on Earth. The journey through these 30 mysteries reveals a civilization defined not by the answers it left behind, but by the profound questions it carved into stone and earth. We have stood before colossal faces with forgotten names and walked the sacred axis of a city built as a cosmic map. We have seen how the tears of a stone infant might call for rain, and how the concept of nothing could be harnessed to track the stars. From the ritual killing of their own monuments to the silent diaspora of their ideas, the Olmec story is a testament to the power of mystery itself. They were the architects of a world so compelling that it became the bedrock for every great culture that followed, from the Mayas' celestial cities to the Aztecs' towering temples. Their true legacy is this: they taught a continent how to dream in jade and basalt, how to see the face of God in a jaguar's snarl, and how to build a civilization not on conquest but on a sacred conversation with the universe. Their enigma challenges our modern urge to categorize and explain, reminding us that some of humanity's greatest leaps begin not with certainty, but with a wonder so deep it moves mountains. Which of their mysteries lingered with you the longest? Was it the silent voyage of the colossal heads, the meaning of the buried jade, or the lost words of the Cascadal block? Share your thoughts below, and if you crave more journeys into the heart of historical puzzles, be sure to subscribe.